All right, welcome back. It's Q1, week 6, day 3. This is video number 29. Today we are actually going to UV layout something for a change. Instead of just watching stuff, we're actually going to do something. So we're going to start out with this square table. We're going to do this instead of that box because I'm tired of looking at that box. We had too many videos with that silly box. So we're going to move on. You'll notice that my table only has one leg. Super. You'll notice that my table only has one leg, and that is because we're going to take this leg, UV it first, and then once it's UV'd, we will copy it, because that's what smart people do. We're going to think about things ahead of time, such as laying out a UV. So we're going to make sure that we lay out the UV first and then copy it, because the UV information will move along with it as we copy it. You'll also notice when I select this individual object, its rotational position is in the center of the table, and that's so when I copy it around, I can make copies and it will just automatically line up. So that's pretty cool. So let's get started. So we start out by thinking about how we are going to lay this thing out. We've got a bunch of weird nooks and crannies we're going to have to get into. We're going to have to planar map this from different angles, and we're going to have to think about what the most important parts of this object are. Now, when we look at a table, 99% of the time when we look at the table, we are going to look at the top of the table. Maybe sometimes we'll look at the bottom, maybe the sides a little bit, but very, very rarely will we actually look underneath the table. So that means when it comes to what's the most important part, the top part is going to be the most important part, followed by the sides, and then very least would be the underside of the table where people stick their gum. Right? Same thing with the legs. The legs are going to be moderately important, but we are going to use the same UV space for all of the legs, and I'll show you how to do that in a minute. But first, let's get started. So we're going to grab the tabletop, and we are going to go ahead and add the UV modifier to it. Unwrap Uv, and then we get this. So I'm going to open the UV editor, and it starts out looking bad, and that's fine. I'm going to move it off to the side here. We are going to look at the top part of the table. Like I said before, we know that this is the most important part, so I'm going to planar map that from Z. Z is up and down. Remember, we need to be perpendicular so that the material that gets placed on that plane is perpendicular. So we're going to go Z because it's up and down. So we're going to planar map this from Z, and then actually before we actually finish that, we're going to grow this. So I'm going to grow to the edge, and then I got a couple options, but I think that's where I'm going to stop. I'm going to just grow it to the edge, and I'm going to planar map from Z again, planar map from Z, and now I'm going to bring this over. And then I am going to expand this out a little bit so you can see. And then I'm going to double click this polygon button and then drag this over. Now what I've got here is the actual top of the table. I'm going to put a checker pattern on there. So I'm actually going to create a quick checker pattern by hitting M. We can do it with this default standard, which is what's already on the table. Right click, Maps, General, Checker. I'll drag it into diffuse. You can see it's already applying. In here I'm going to change the tiling to like let's go 5 and 5. Let's see how that looks. It's a good start. We may have to go more, but you can see we've got distortion in the leg already, and what is going on here, that is a wreck. But the top of the table looks okay, and that's because we have already grabbed part of it and adjusted it. Now if I go to Tools, Relax, Polygon Angles, you'll notice that I've got this little edge here, and this little edge is actually this edge here. But you'll notice I'm getting some distortion. The way I'm going to get rid of that distortion is I'm going to grab those edges, all of these edges here, this one, and I'm going to break it. And you'll see they start out white. I'm going to click it, I'm going to break it, now it's green. Green means that that edge is split. And that's what we want. We want that to be a split edge and this to be a split edge. So now when we take this object, again I'm going to select the whole thing, and then I'm going to relax it. Tools, relax. Polygon is the default, which is nice. It used to be edge. Anyway, so now that's set. So when this is now applied, it is no longer distorted on the sides. So now this image or this type of material will be perfectly laid out. Now, when I'm done with this section, I'm just going to put it off to the side because I have a bunch of other faces here that I still have to deal with. Okay, now we know that the bottom is probably the least important piece, but we also know that it is kind of like, it is what it is. Like, I would say that people will look at this and this edge, these edges all the way around, the least. So I'm going to go ahead and planar map this as well. Planar map, once again, up and down by Z. All right, now it looks weird, it looks square still, and it's upside down. It's hard to tell, but you got to remember that when you planar map something, it's the image is coming from the top. So if the normal of this face is facing down, like you can see with that yellow edge, if that normal is facing down and I try and relax this, it's going to flip on me. Watch, tools, relax, polygon. It turned. The reason it turned is because it's actually flipping inside out and then turning. The way we can fix this, and I'm going to hit Control Z for undo. The way we can fix this is by flipping it first. So mirror this, like just click on this button there, boop. Now it doesn't, you can't really tell, but you'll have to take my word for it that it flipped over. Now if we relax, it just lays out flat. Now, we don't care as much about distortion on the bottom side since no one's going to be looking at it, but just for giggles, I want to make sure that all of these edges are split too. I'm going to grab them like this. You'll see I have all the outside and those, and I'm going to break them all at the same time. Now I can grab this section again, grab them all, hit relax, and now they flatten out. Now you can tell that the bottom is currently perfectly laid out. Now we know it's going to be less important and it looks a lot like my top, but I want to make sure I don't get them confused, so I'm going to take this one and shrink it down. Once again, no one's going to look at this, so I'm just going to fit this part in wherever I can. Okay, cool. Moving right along. So we've got the bottom, and you'll notice big checkers because it's very low resolution. The top is smaller checkers because it's high resolution. Now we've got to figure out this other section. So this mess right here, this and all that. So I'm going to grab all of this here, right? And I'm going to make sure I get all of it. So I'm going to hold shift and I should be able to grab that whole ring. The other way I could do that is hit L and marquee select across the side like this. Boop. Alright, so there I have that, but that gets me the inside, which I don't want, so I'm going to undo that. I'm going to select that, hold shift and click, and that should give me the entire ring. I'm going to turn the grid off for now so it's a little bit easier to see. And I'm going to squeeze that down so we can get a little bit better. Alright, cool. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to grow this out, because what I want is I want this edge and this edge. So if I hit grow, it'll automatically expand one edge in every direction, which gives me this entire section. Now, we're going to planar map this. We could actually, let's cylindrical map it. We're going to have to figure out a way to make it look good, but for now, we're just going to cylindrical map. If we cylindrical map from Z, we wrap around it like a Coke can. However, it's not accurate in the way it's laid out. Like, it's going to be weird. We can relax it, and then it sort of splits out in a weird way. And that's okay, but I'm going to show you sort of a better way to do this. So we're going to grab this, grab these two, double click the polygon, drag this down, or drag it out of the way so we can work with it. Now I'm going to marquee select the bottom and drag it down, and you'll see that the part that I didn't grab, which is these edges here, sort of spread out a little bit. Now I'm going to do the same thing here. Mostly I'm doing this so I can find the edge. You see, when you cylindrical map something, it doesn't always lay out perfectly. So I'm going to grab this edge here, this one that's sort of angled, and I want to stitch it to the blue. So I want to have my selection, and I'm going to stitch it to the, oops, and I'm going to stitch to the opposite direction. I guess I got to grab this top one. I'll grab the top one and stitch to source. There we go. And same thing here. Grab this top one, stitch to source. Now that all my edges are laid out or stitched properly, I'm going to hit number 3, grab these, tools, relax, Once again, Polygon Angles, boom. Now you'll notice that it does start stretching in a weird way because the bottom has this angle, right? In order to make that work a little better, we can grab these bottom edges through here, here, and here, and break them. All right, now we can grab faces again and start relax, and starts to line up. Now sometimes you can do straighten selection and it works, and sometimes it just looks terrible. It looks like this time it's more terrible than good. So our options here are to break more edges or try and align them ourselves. In this case, we can align it by taking just part of it, straightening it out by 90 degrees, and then moving it. And once it's roughly in the right spot, we can try and relax it again. All right, that's getting there. Grab these edges, move them down some. I want to actually maximize this. You see, what we can also do is grab all of these verts along this top edge, but not these. That was an accident. Grab all those like this, and we can actually use some of the tools on the top right to straighten them all together. So we're going to grab align horizontally to pivot, click that, move it up. Do the same thing here to this section, align horizontally to pivot, and then the bottom section too will be our last one, align horizontally to pivot. And now we can try and relax those one last time. There we go. That's pretty okay. Once again, this is probably not the most important part that we're going to have, so we may end up just tucking it in wherever we can. I'm going to hold control as I shrink this so I don't shrink it beyond where it needs to be, or like I need to keep track of where it is, and I don't want to stretch anything that shouldn't be stretched appropriately. So now our entire tabletop is done. Okay, the next section we need to do is our leg. Okay, you can't even see the leg pieces here because they're a separate object. So we're going to go back, select the leg, actually select the table, go to this. We're going to right click on Unwrap and then collapse all. Hit yes. By collapsing all, what we've done is we've saved that UV information inside the object. So it's all saved. Now we're going to attach the leg, and then actually let's not do that, undo. So I should have two separate objects. Let's go ahead and do the leg unwrapping now. So let's call UN for unwrap, and then open up our UV editor. Now it starts out a mess. We are going to start out here, grab all of the faces, and you'll notice if I right click and I isolate selection, you'll notice that there's no top to the leg. It does not have a top at all. It has a bottom, but no top. That's because it'll constantly be hidden inside the table, so we don't need it. So I took it out. So select all the edges, and this time we're going to cube or box map. Okay, now the box map didn't work super well, but what it did do is it broke this object up in a way where we can get a lot out of it. Now we can grab this edge here and stitch those together so that now I should be able to grab these faces and relax them, and they should sort of relax okay. Let's see, start relax. All right, kind of okay. There's this, and now I need to grab this edge right here. I'm going to stitch that to average. It's going to look bad at first, and that's not a real problem. We can stitch one of these to average 2, and now we can grab those edges and relax them. It's starting to get better. This is attached to that. This is not attached, so we grab some edges here. Whatever edge you select, you can see what edge it matches with. So as long as you only have one selected, you can usually figure out which one needs to be connected to it. So I want this one to connect, so I'm going to stitch to average or source. Either one's fine. But now I should have all of them together like that. So you can see that the bottom is here, and then it lays out appropriately. We can align it however we want, and then scale it down. And then our leg is done. This is done. We can apply, be finished. And now this is basically the UVs laid out. So now, end isolate, grab our object, hit T for top so we can see our object is selected. I'm going to hit E to rotate it. I'm going to hold shift, make sure angle snap is on, rotate it exactly 90 degrees. And I'm going to make 3 copies because I need 1, 2, 3 copies to make 4 legs. I'm going to call it M leg is fine. It'll be 02 and 04 and whatever. I'm actually going to make them an instance. So that way if I want to change one, it changes all of them. Click OK. And now I should have 4 table legs on 4 sides of the object. Now I can grab my table and I'm going to collapse the stack, collapse all, yes, and now I can attach my leg. 1, 2, 3, 4. So now my table has 4 legs, and modifier list UN for unwrap. Now open the UV editor. We've got all 4 table legs are right here. Now we need to lay them out. We talked before about what's the most important part, and that's this. Right? I'm going to grab by element, that way I don't mess anything up. Put this in here. I'm going to try and get to a corner. Go right along the edge here, put it in the corner. Get it right where I want it. Good. And now I'm going to squeeze it down to make room for everything else, because I got to have everything else. So it's still going to be the most important, but I need to make sure that I have enough room to fit everything in there. I can do that. I'm going to turn angle snap off so I can line that up a little better. I'm going to try and make sure that this is aligned sort of straight up and down-ish. And then I'm going to scale that down till it fits inside the space that I have. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. I want this to be pretty high resolution, but I don't want it to be too problematic. This is the bottom. We talked about this already. I think I'm going to fit this in here. Once again, I'm going to make it as big as I can, but it's not nearly as important as the other side. So it'll be blurry, but that's okay. Once again, it's underneath. And now this section here. What we can do here is, because these corners, each one of these sections is a corner, I think what I'm going to do is, in order to keep the resolution equal to this, or at least semi-equal, I am going to split these down the edge and then line them up here. Boom, boom, boom. So because of that, I'm going to expand these out by holding Control. Each one needs to be about the size of the table. I'm going to use that as my guideline roughly and get it there. If it's not going to fit, and it doesn't look like it's going to fit, I'm going to have to shrink it some. But I want to keep it so I can fit all 4 of them in this space up here. If I need to, maybe I can take this and shrink it a little bit. If I shrink this a little bit and move it down, it's a little more efficient. I'm losing some of the detail on my leg, but I think that's a choice I'm going to have to make. And then I think this object is going to have to shrink till I can fit half of it in there. About half. Once I got half of it in, I'm going to break it. So I'm going to turn off element, grab these 2, and I can break these as a group with right there. Now I can move this around up here like that. I can also relax this too. Tools, relax, boom. Same thing with this. I'm going to go back to grabbing by element, tools, start, relax. All right, cool. So I need to make sure these fit and that they are inside well. There we go. And there we go. We can leave a little bit of buffer there, and that's basically what we got. Okay, so we've used most of the space. If you look at the square, we've used most of the space that we have. You want to use as much space as possible while still keeping things relatively equal. If we look at our checker map, you can tell that our highest resolution is there. Now I would say that for M, I'm going to hit M, check our checker map, and change the tiling to 10, because right now it's so big we can't really tell the difference, but that's a little better. So each one of those you can sort of see better as to how dense it is. Like those are about, that's about 3 times more dense on top than it is on the bottom, which seems about right. So this is good. So now all we need to do is export this out. Okay, so open UV editor, tools, and we are going to render UV template. Now we always export these out at 2048 by 2048 because even though we're never going to use a resolution that high, it's better to have a high resolution map to work with and then export it as a lower resolution than vice versa. So I'm going to render UV template. I'm going to call this this is table UV, and we are going to call this, it's a PNG, so I'm going to call it table underscore UV. Actually, I'm going to call it square table UV. Hit save. Yes. Cool. Now from here we're going to go into Photoshop. So I'm going to close this, minimize this, and open Photoshop, and I'll see you when it opens. So here comes Photoshop. Alright, Photoshop is now open. I'm going to click there, grab my UV, and just drag it into the work area. It's going to think for a second, it's going to open up, and you're not going to be able to see it much. I'll double click on this layer 0, call it UV, hit enter. I'm going to create a new layer, move it below, and call it background. And I'm going to paint that layer with a solid color. Get my bucket. I usually use black. Cool. Just so we can see our UV and how it's laid out. Now this UV, this image is 2048 by 2048. We are going to use an image that I got off of texturize.club that has a bunch of free wood images. So I used it on the last one as well, and I'm going to hit OK, and I want to put that right in between the UV and the background layer. Okay, now this image will texture perfectly, so that's very nice. We're going to lock that in and then hit enter, and then I'm going to duplicate that layer, click OK, and I'm going to Control T and drag it over like that. Enter. It's sort of okay. Control T. Let me see if I rotate it, see if it looks better. Not really. I guess it's okay. I don't know. Like, actually, I'm not a fan. They said it would be text seamless, but it doesn't look seamless. Instead of trying to like mess with it, delete layers. Instead of worrying about having a seam in the middle, I'm just going to take that and then drag it across like that. That way I know that that image is going to be relatively high resolution. Now with that said, come on. Cool, there it goes, it's placed. I could actually take this image and then expand it all the way out. Oops. Undo. Drag it out so it fits the entire image, and then hit enter. The problem is, on the top that makes a lot of sense. It's probably still too close of a view for it to actually look good that way, but here it's going to look bad. So I definitely am going to need to duplicate the layer at least, and then take this layer here and move it, Control T, I'm going to rotate it so that the grain is moving in a logical direction. The grain here should be moving left to right, not up and down. If it's moving the wrong direction, it'll look weird. So now the grain's moving the right direction. Okay, cool. That's it for now, because I've got the wood grain is going a logical direction in each view that we have, so it should be okay. So we're done with this. So I'm going to grab these two. I'm going to hide the UV layer, and now I can take this file, save as. I'm going to save as a like a Photoshop file. Go on to table UV. Square table, and it's no longer a UV, it's a DM. Save. Okay. Go back into 3D Studio. Hit M. Now we know that we can create a new material. Material, scanline, standard. Let me get this out of the way. So checker map. I'm going to take my Photoshop file, square table DM, drag it in, and then attach it to diffuse. Double click it. I'm pretty sure it's already selected. I'm going to place on selection and then wait for it to render. Oh, it's not going to render because I don't have this set. There. All right, there we go. I've set that to render, and now we have made our table. We've got the grain going up and down because that would make most sense. The wood would be going up and down on this one, but the side to side on here, it looks like it's a little high density, but that's okay. So now all I got to do is take this, set it up, and then this time what I'm going to ask you to do, instead of sending me this render, what I'm going to ask you to do is actually send me this image here. So you're going to hit, go to the UV editor. You're going to maximize this, and to turn in, you're going to come to this section here, reset the texture list, show the square table DM like this, and then I want you to go to snipping tool, new snip, and then snip out this object just like that. If one of them lights up, that's fine. It's not a big deal. Snip that, and then you're going to send it to me. Okay, now everybody's going to be slightly different, so and that's fine. But this is the image I want you to send to me to show me that you've finished your UV table. All right, and then of course you're going to save this. Just hit yes, and we're going to save it as let's call it whatever period you're in. So I'm in period 8 underscore your last name underscore let's call it square table. Square table, and that'll be a PNG. So hit save, and that'll be a different resolution for everybody and stuff like that. But I just want to make sure that you have your material laid out properly and your UV laid out properly. And if you send me that file, I'll know it's all good. All right, so that's it. That's how we do that. You'll notice that all the edges make sense, all the grain makes sense. Maybe not this part, we'll just let that go. But this part makes sense, and that looks good, but underneath it's a little mess. But that's okay. No one's going to see that anyway. All right, so thanks for watching. Now you know how to UV. Next week, you will make your free 2 project where you actually learn how to use your UV skills and make something cool and then put an actual material on it. So I will see you next time.